again. They count, deluded creatures, on the continued liberality of the banks, whose persuasive entreaties seduced them into the slippery paths of speculation. So think here of house flipping in the housing bubble. But they have now to learn that the banks cannot help them if they would, and would not if they could. They were free enough to lend their aid when assistance is not needed, but now, when it is indispensable to carry out the projects which would not have been undertaken, but for the temptations they held forth, no further resources can be supplied. So here, what is he describing? A situation where a government-established central bank is creating a whole lot of money out of thin air, and that money is going to fuel speculation in various kinds of property. And people who are buying this property, most of them don't know anything about speculating. They have no business doing this. Everybody thinks he can get rich quick because there's all this money floating around. And meanwhile, it's all built on sand. You don't create wealth by printing up more green pieces of paper. You print up all the green pieces of paper you want, you still have an unchanged amount of lumber, steel, whatever. Those things are still unchanged. That's what matters. So you have this frenzy, and then inevitably a crash. But this is my favorite. It says, December 1837. Any person who has soberly observed the course of events for the last 3 years must have foreseen the very state of things which now exists. He will see that the banks have been striving with all their might, each emulating the other, to force their issues, that is, the money, into circulation and flood the land. He will see that they have used every art of cajolery and allurement to entice men to accept their proffered aid, that in this way they gradually excited a thirst for speculation, which they sedulously stimulated until it increased to a delirious fever, and men in the epidemic frenzy of the hour wildly rushed upon all sorts of desperate adventures. They dug canals where no commerce asked for the means of transportation. They opened roads where no travelers desired to penetrate. And they built cities where there were none to inhabit. This is another phenomenon we see when the central bank creates a whole lot of money, is that it's not just there are more projects undertaken, there tend to be crazy nutball projects undertaken. And normally, the limiting factor that prevents the country's scarce resources from being blown on stupid half-baked schemes is the interest rate. But when the interest rate is artificially pushed down, or when the economy is flooded with money, then the crazy schemes and the normal schemes can compete on the same level. Just recently, we just heard that in Las Vegas, they were building a 65-acre private little city. It's a bizarre, ridiculous, obviously bubble project that was obviously a total waste of resources. It's now going bankrupt. Talk about cities where there were none to inhabit. These types of crazy things go on in these mad booms, and then inevitably they go bust, and we've wasted all those resources on them. They weren't profitable in the first place. They should never have been started. We're all the poorer because they were started. So what I'm suggesting, therefore, is not that we need a little more regulatory tinkering. We just need a little more regulation. Look, regulation is totally beside the point. Because if you're not going to get to the root cause, which is we have a central bank that's creating trillions of dollars out of thin air, that from 2001 to 2005, on average, was creating $8 billion out of thin air every week for 4 solid years, and then the banking system can increase that by another 9 or 10 times, you think that might have a teensy-weensy bit to do with why people are going crazy speculating and making ridiculous bets? So if we're not going to get to this, forget about it. You can regulate all you want. All you're going to do is, yes, with regulation you might be able to prevent this exact specific type of thing from happening, but you won't be able to prevent the 99 other things that will inevitably happen if you have a Fed. It's like the shoe bomber. You know, we're never going to have another shoe bomber now because we're all ready for him. Because, you know, now what do? We're taking our shoes off at the airport. So if we could ever get into a time machine and go back a few years, we could catch the shoe bomber. But you see that regulation gets you ready for yesterday's crisis. But that is just looking at symptoms rather than the ultimate cause. What we need to look at is the system itself, the money, the institutional factors here, the institutional structure. The Fed itself feeds into this. And this is not the free market. This is the most insidious form of intervention into the free market, and yet the free market is forced to take the blame for it. The money we have, the green pieces of paper in your wallet, used to be redeemable into gold, and that kept the government honest. They couldn't just print all they wanted to, because you could always turn it in for gold. And what are they going to do, print up gold? They've only got so much of it, and that would keep them honest. Today, there's almost nothing to limit them. They can create trillions and trillions of dollars and destroy the economy if they want to. There's nothing to stop them. So we have a money that is backed by nothing, that can be manipulated by a central bank, that can be created in immense quantities out of thin air, and it gives rise to the boom-bust cycle. We're now living through the bust period. And then to add insult to injury, when the bust comes, the major firms that get caught out in it then go to the paper money producer, the Fed, and ask for a bailout. Can you print up more money to bail us out? And they usually get what they want. Now, is this so, what am I missing here? Is this so obviously the best system imaginable that we can't even raise any non-trivial alternatives? But none are being raised. You can watch CNBC all day. You won't hear this brought up. But it's so obviously the case. But no mention of it. No, we can never, ever return to any type of sound money. We have to have money that the king or the wizard can increase at will. So what we're watching, therefore, unfolding is a slow-motion train wreck. Because we have a government that is made up of, and this is true not just of the Democrats. There are some Republicans who kind of get it. Of course, Ron Paul understands the whole thing, as usual. But the rest of them are kind of learning from him, which is a good sign. But by and large, the establishment has no idea what's going on, and they don't even seem to really care. As long as they can, buy some votes by throwing around money that doesn't exist, then they're happy with that. But everything they're doing is the opposite of what should be done. Because the last point I'll make tonight is just simply, well, then what should we do, right? I mean, what should we do now? What does the Austrian business cycle suggest we should do? Well, first of all, don't keep printing new money. Don't keep forcing interest rates down. Because, as I say, that'll just continue this unsustainable structure going on even further so that the eventual bust will be all the worse. So don't do that. But that is what they're doing. That is absolutely what they're doing. And now we're starting to hear, because now they're trying to lower interest rates to 0. Well, now we're hearing people saying, this was the Wall Street Journal the other day, but he's not alone, Greg Mankiw, saying 0 is too high. That's too high of an interest rate, 0. Maybe -3 would be good. I mean, are these people freaking insane? So in other words, yeah, let's just perpetuate the boom. Let's just perpetuate it so that it's even worse 2 or 3 years from now. Typical politician response. Maybe I'll be out of office by then, collecting my pension, which I will immediately invest in gold, because some of the politicians, even though they're ruining us, they know how to protect their own money, and they put it in gold. So obviously don't do that, but they are doing it. Don't have stimulus packages. This is, again, one of the dumb things you could possibly do. What should be done? You shouldn't bail institutions out. That's exactly, again, the wrong thing to do. You shouldn't give them special lending or special money, because what you're doing is propping up, in many cases, institutions that shouldn't even exist, or that were artificially inflated during the bubble. They need to go so that the real wealth generators in the economy can get their assets and give us genuine recovery. But that's exactly the opposite of what they want to do. Well, what did Japan do? Well, Japan in the 1990s did all these things. 8 stimulus packages, interest rates down to 0, they partially nationalized their banking system, and on and on and on. And it propped up every company you could imagine. And 19 years and counting, they're still not out. So if that plan sounded familiar, it's because it's exactly what the US government is doing to us. It's what the Republicans were doing in 2008. It's what the Democrats are doing today. That's all they can think to do. When all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And all they have is, the Fed has a printing press to print money. Yeah, printing up pieces of paper. It can really solve structural imbalances, right? I mean, this shouldn't satisfy an intelligent 4th grader. And then all the federal government can do is just spend. So that's what it's doing. We'll just blow some money, see what happens. We're in big trouble here. But we don't have to be. Just look at American history. In 1920, there was a Great Depression that nobody's heard of. The reason nobody's heard of it is because it was over so quickly. It was a devastating depression. But instead of a stimulus package, the president at the time cut the budget. In fact, from 1920 to 1922, the budget was cut in half. And we're all told today, you can't do that during a depression. No, you can't cut the government budget. Meanwhile, all these congressmen, they're getting new carpeting in their offices, because this is to stimulate the economy, you understand. So they're all saying, oh, no, cutting is the worst thing you can do. Well, it was done in the Depression of 1920. The Fed stayed out of it, did not increase the money supply, and they didn't bail out any troubled companies. They said, look, if you're troubled, it's too bad, but then this is the market's rendering of a verdict, that you are not satisfying consumer demand adequately, so we need people who are better at it to take over from you.